Hello, everyone. Sorry about the delay. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty. Well, hello and welcome to our program this evening. I'm Stephanie Gaspar, president of Kissimmee Valley Audubon Society, and appreciate everyone watching. This is our first program of our 21-22 season, and my board of directors and I hope you enjoy it. Due to COVID-19, we have decided to continue programs online until further notice. Additionally, we are seeking members to join our board of directors. There are still various positions open, so please get in touch if you are interested. Our contact information is in the description below. If you would like to join our chapter or be added to our email list, send us a message and we will get back to you. Stay up to date with our programs by checking our website, following us on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Before we begin, I would like to mention a few housekeeping items. Log into YouTube and type any questions you have in the chat. Brian will answer questions to clarify specifics during the presentation, and any other discussion-related questions will be answered at the end of the program. Additionally, if we do have a connection problem again, just stay tuned, and once it gets fixed, we will resume the program. Tonight's topic is about life on a seabird nesting island. This past summer, our speaker, Brian Cammarano, was a Project Puffin Research Assistant on Stratton Island off the coast of Maine. He conducted research and monitored a tern colony, included the federally listed Roseate Tern. Brian is an avid birder, avian conservationist, and University of Central Florida graduate with a degree in Ecology, Evolutionary, and Conservation Biology. He was also one of the founding members of the UCF Nighthawk Audubon campus chapter and continued as the vice president until he graduated. He has been working seasonal jobs to experience firsthand what it takes to be a field biologist and has been involved in many avian conservation efforts, such as songbird banding in Key Biscayne for the Cape Florida Banding Station, grassland songbird nest searching in eastern Montana, black rail detection surveying in Big Cypress, and monitoring beach nesting birds in Southwest Florida. So we are very happy to have you here with us today, Brian. And now I will pass it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I just wanted to say thank you to you and to Kissimmee Valley Audubon Society for hosting me. And thank you to everyone joining and to whoever eventually watches this. But let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for the introduction. Stephanie covered a lot there. So we'll be talking about working and living on a seabird colony. One second. There we go. So, like I said, working and living in a seabird colony off the coast of Maine, in the Gulf of Maine. That picture right there, you can see a common tern, our most abundant breeder, with its two chicks there. So let's go ahead and get started. So what exactly is Project Puffin? So I was hired by Project Puffin as a research assistant. It started in 1973. The founder was Dr. Stephen Kress, and he partnered up with the National Audubon Society with an effort to restore puffins to historical nesting sites in the Gulf of Maine. What exactly he did was he knew that these Atlantic puffins used to nest here in the Gulf of Maine, and unfortunately, during the colonial days, due to hunting of meat and their feathers and their eggs, they were pretty much eradicated from the Gulf of Maine. And so he wanted to restore them. His idea was, let's go to a healthy colony up north in Newfoundland and let's grab some chicks. This was all with the approval of the government. Let's bring them down to Eastern Egg Rock. I'll take care of them. I'll feed them. This is a very pilot idea, so not everyone was on board, but he went for it. And due to these puffins' high nest site fidelity, meaning they return to the same spot to nest every year, the efforts paid off, and within a few years, the puffins returned to the Gulf of Maine, And ever since 1973, we've been researching and monitoring these seabirds. Now, instead of Project Puffin, they go by the name of Audubon Seabird Restoration Program, and they actively work to benefit rare and endangered seabirds worldwide, providing restoration methods and promoting seabird conservation and appreciation. So projects like in China, there's a really rare and endangered Chinese crested tern. The project helped get those restored again through audio devices and decoys. So right there in that photo, you can see a puffin right next to its decoy. All right, so diving a little deeper into Project Puffin, they oversee 7 islands. Those top 3 islands you see in the north, Eastern Egg Rock, Seal Island, and Matinicus Rock, those are all puffin islands. They also have tern colonies, but when you go further south, you have the last 4 islands there, Jenny, Pond, Outer Green, and Stratton. Those are strictly tern colonies. So what's good about restoring tern colonies is that the puffins are much more comfortable nesting and breeding within a tern colony, or with the presence of a tern colony on the island. So it's all kind of like a hierarchy. So you restore the terns and you bring back the puffins, and it all comes together. The southern islands, like I said, they don't have any puffins. It's well beyond their southern range. So we focus on terns there. That was my island, Stratton Island, that southernmost island. What's good about being the southernmost island is that you get the southernmost range of a few breeding birds and then the northernmost range of a few breeding birds. So I'll dive a little more deeper into that once we get to the breeding birds. But let's look at Stratton here. So Stratton Island, it's a little over 21 acres of land. It's about 2 miles off of shore. So it's pretty close to the mainland. And it's the centerpiece of the Phineas W. Sprague Memorial Sanctuary. The island offers a variety of nesting habitat for breeding birds. So you can see the sections there. We have that big yellow section would be where the deciduous forest is, and interior deciduous forest. That's also where camp is. The large pond in the dead center is a great spot for the breeding waterfowl. And then we also have a mature apple orchard. So that'll be zone 1, 2, and 3 in the green. That's where our wading birds have a rookery. So they breed there. And then most importantly, of course, is that bottom section there labeled 1 through 11. That's the beach where all the terns are nesting. So ideal habitat for the terns. All right, and so luckily enough, this year we had a wading bird census, which is every other year. So I was fortunate enough to be part of the wading bird census on Stratton. That included going into the rookery very, very early in the day. You don't want to be there midday because the adults do flush. So the eggs will be exposed to the elements, and we don't want that. So we section off a few hours where we're allowed to be in the rookery, where we can have the goal of counting as many and hopefully all nests within the rookery. The majority being Glossy Ibis. So Glossy Ibis are going to be those really blue eggs in the dead center photo on the top, really blue eggs with those dried reeds as nesting material, as well as that bottom right picture. That's also a Glossy Ibis. You can see some dried up leaves there. So majority of the wading birds are Glossy Ibis. And then you have snowy egrets, and they're in a lot lower numbers, but you can ID them from the very thin twigs that they use. So that bottom middle picture, the very thin twigs and the very pale blue eggs. So that's a snowy egret. And then we have great egret, which they like a nice big platform. They're a large bird, so they like that nice big platform. And you can see that on the left picture where we're using a mirror pole. So you use the mirror pole to your advantage to get those high nesting wading birds and be able to see how many eggs are inside the nest. So you can see there probably 3 eggs in there. They're large blue eggs. And also we have black-crowned night herons. They are state threatened in Maine, so we have a few of those. They can be a bit of a problem with the least terns because they like to feed and predate the least terns, but they are state threatened, so it's good to have them there. Then moving on to the shorebirds and waterfowl that we have nesting on our island. The spotted sandpiper, very cute little shorebird. They nest pretty much any kind of vegetative area around water. You can see that bottom left photo is the iconic 4 eggs pointing to the center. That's a spotted sandpiper nest, and the bottom right photo is a spotted sandpiper chick. Those long legs. That's just a few days old, and it's already super mobile. And then, like I said before, we're lucky enough to have a northernmost range of species, and that's the American oyster catcher. So they breed along the Atlantic coast, but we're lucky enough to have a few breeding birds there on our island. The top right photo shows really all they need is, a rocky shore with a few pebbles, and they make a small scrape depression and nest there. And the eggs are very camouflaged. So whenever they're not tending to their eggs, it's hard for, a predator like a gull to find them. And then the waterfowl, so that big pond we have in the middle of the island is great breeding spot for Canada geese, mallard, gadwall, blue-winged teal, green-winged teal, northern shoveler, and then a sea duck, which pretty much takes advantage of the whole island, the common eider. They nest pretty much anywhere that's shaded with lots of vegetation where the female can pretty much just lay their eggs and just incubate them for a very long extended periods of time. So we were also fortunate enough, or I don't know, fortunate, but we got to do the common eider census this year, and that means we have to cover the whole island and count as many common eider nests possible that we encounter. So what's kind of not great about them is when you flush one off the nest, they produce this musk that shoots out and sprays all over their eggs. And so it's to deter predators from predating their eggs. But when you're crawling through, tangles and one sprays and flushes right in front of you and you're downwind of it, it's just not too fun, but great experience. So we counted around, I think up to 600 nests of common eiders. So they nest in large numbers there. All right, moving on to why we're primarily on the island is these breeding birds known as seabirds. So we have all 4 breeding terns there. We have common tern in huge numbers. We counted upwards of 1,300 nests this season. Then we have the roseate terns, which they prefer a more natural caves, and rather than open nesting like most terns, they like these caves. So due to habitat loss, they're federally listed. They're on a huge decline. So there are heavy conservation efforts being put into monitoring roseate terns. We have the largest colony in Maine on Stratton Island, around 140 nesting pairs. Then you have the Arctic terns, and that's on one of those species where we're on the southernmost range for the Arctic terns. So they're in very low numbers there. You really have to have a good eye for them, mixed in with all the common terns. They tend to nest on the outer edges of the common tern colony just because of competition. And so we had about 10 of those nests. The least tern colony, we have upwards of 70 breeding pairs on Stratton. Last year, they actually didn't show up. We weren't too sure. It might have been predators in the area that deterred them from nesting there. But luckily enough, we had them this year. We had around, like I said, 70 nesting pairs. And you can see at least turn up in that top right corner there, that sandy plumage that just camouflages right with the sandy beach that they nest on. That top left picture is an Arctic tern. You can tell it's an Arctic tern from the really dark facial features. And the bottom left is a pretty cool photo. So that has a 1 day old chick up top, the one that looks dry. Then that wet chick on the bottom is just a few hours old. You can even see some of the shell that the adult hasn't disposed yet. And then there's a third egg there that is, if you look closely, it's starring. So meaning that that chick in there is ready to hatch, and it's using its egg tooth to crush that shell and emerge. And when I say egg tooth, I mean, if you look at all of these chicks here, you can see that little white tip on their bill. They use that little calcium, on the tip of their bill to pierce the shell and hatch. And then we don't have puffins on Stratton, but we do have an alcid. We have black guillemots. So we passively monitor them because they are in low numbers, but we have a nice little area of historic burrows where they nest, and we kind of just check up on them every once in a while. That bottom right picture, you can see a really cute black guillemot chick. They're all black. Eventually, it'll get a white stripe right there on its wing. All right, moving on. So my main task and reason I was hired to be here was to research and monitor these terns. Big part of it is assessing breeding productivity through chick growth and survival. And what I mean by that is, in order to get an idea of how the whole colony is doing, we focus on certain plots throughout the colony. We fence off a little area with chicken wire, and we monitor the chicks or the nests within that area. So you can see in that left picture in the background, there's a bit of chicken wire fence surrounding the area. Also in that top right picture, you can see that chicken wire fence. So what we do with those chicks in there is, once they hatch, we band them. And then every other day, what we want to do is collect their wing cord and their weight. Having those two data points, we can look at how a chick is doing. Like, so let's say two chicks have the same wing cord, but one is heavier. That means that chick is being fed more and developing and growing at a higher rate and is much healthier. So it's looking at all those factors. It's good to have those two things to look at. And then, so that picture is kind of funny on the left. You can see the parents after they're done diving at you and defecating all over you. That's their defense mechanisms. They get a little comfortable and they'll rest on your shoulder just to check out like what exactly you're doing to their chick. But yeah, so every other day we wrangle up these chicks. Once they get old enough where they're moving around and they're mobile, we have to put them in that cardboard box there you see on that bottom right. You just wrangle them all up and then bring them down to the shore, causing less disturbance in the colony, and you process them down there. And since they're all banded and we know which nest they belong to, we're able to go back into the plot and put them in the correct area. All right, moving on. So we also banned the roseate terns. What little extra we do to kind of put more conservation efforts into monitoring them is that we put a plastic field readable on them. So in hopes of, getting resite data and seeing nest site fidelity and seeing where their movements are, stopover habitats and wintering grounds, all that is great to know. So we know what to protect and what to put the money in to restore habitat and whatever they need. So you can see right there, a little roseate tern chick. They have this like diagnostic, like spiky plumage, like looking like little hedgehogs, and they have really dark legs. So there's just probably a 1 or 2 day old chick there. And so the other part of research that we do is conducting feeding studies to assess diet and feeding rate. So we do that. I'm just going to go back to a different slide real quick to show you where we set up. So in that top right picture, you can see our blinds. That's where we spend a few hours in the morning or in the afternoon to monitor the terns without any disturbance. So what we do is we designate seven to eight nests where we monitor the parents coming in and feeding the chicks. So the things we're looking at is we want to identify the prey species and the size, and we want to see which chick was fed, time of arrival and departure, and which adult provided the food. So all that information is important, but sometimes it's just too quick, or there's just too many birds coming in to feed. That the most important thing to get is whether a chick was fed or not. But let's say in a perfect scenario, you have the perfect opportunity to collect all the data. So you see an adult coming in with food, it's calling, the chick recognized the parent's call, you see them perk up a bit, and we're looking at nest 4. And it has an A and a B chick. So the A chick, previous to the stint, we marked the A chick with a colored marker on its head, let's say blue. So then A chick's gonna have the blue on its head, and then the B chick, all the B chicks get blue on their back. So then we mark the B chicks with blue on their back. If there is a C chick, it gets it on its belly. But let's say it's just A and B chick. So then the adult's coming in, you notice it's a fish. Okay, so we got fish. And let's say it's that bird right there on the right. It's a roseate tern coming in with that long skinny fish on its bill. So that we know is a sand lance, has a pointed snout. So now we have the prey species. So it's a sand lance. Okay, now the size. So the size we go with Coleman length. So right there on the left side picture, you can see there is a common tern with its Coleman is that top part of its mandible. You have that length right there. So you have to picture the fish. If you turn it perpendicular and you straighten that fish, how long would that fish be, right? So let's say that roseate tern, maybe it's a 1.5 to 1.75 sand lance. So now you have prey species and you have the size of the fish. Now it comes in and it feeds the A chick, okay, A chick from nest 4. And during all of this, you take a quick look at your watch, you see that landed at whatever time. They usually stick around for a bit, they check up on their chicks, make sure everything's okay, and then they go off and fly off. So right before they fly off, if you have a little bit of time, you see if you can identify the adult. So the best way to identify the adult would be if one is unbanded and one is banded. So when picking these nests, we try to pick a nesting pair that has a banded adult and an unbanded adult. So if you're lucky enough, you can see the legs of the adult, be like, oh, okay, that one's banded. Okay, we got banded tern. And that's one complete feeding study right there. All that can happen within seconds. And then another adult comes into to nest 2, and then another adult comes into nest 1. So it's this was the most overwhelming part for me. And I wasn't too good at fish species. I didn't really know my foraging fish. So I had to learn that. So this was the hardest part for me, but it was pretty exciting. Like sometimes you just see things coming in and pretty fast paced. So slowing it down a bit, we also, in the beginning of the season, we resighted banded breeding adults. So this was a lot easier. They're a lot more relaxed once they get to the island and they're kind of checking out which nest they're going to be at. They'll hang out around a burrow. We're primarily resighting roseate terns because they have those field readables. But also, if you have the opportunity, you always want to try to get those metal bands like a common tern or an Arctic tern. But anyways, back to the roseate terns. They kind of hang around the area with their potential mate or their mate that they have, and kind of check out their burrow. You can see them kind of organizing the area, fixing up the little depression, scrape. So there you have a good chance at getting a recite. So on a 3-hour recite stint, I was getting upwards of 40 to 50 recites. So a lot of these birds have high nest site fidelity. So the chicks that we banded this year hopefully return next year or the next year to be breeding adults. We see a lot of the same birds coming year after year. That left side picture, you can see a portable blind stint. So early in the season, I mentioned we were looking for those sprinkled Arctic tern nests throughout the whole big common tern colony. We would use these portable blinds to scout for those. So that's how I found most of the Arctic tern nests this season. And that right side picture is just the scope we use to recite. We do that all from the blinds. And now, with all that research and monitoring, talk a little bit about island life. So with all this, we're living on the island for the whole duration of the season. So what that means is there's no running water. It's very rustic conditions. We live in our tents. We do have a permanent 3-sided kitchen shelter, which you can see on that left side picture is that wooden structure on the right. And you can see just all of our supplies laid out. That was day one of being on the island. We had to get all of our supplies, all of our food for the next 3 to 4 weeks. And Stratton is actually fortunate enough to have their own boat. So we didn't have to bring too much water because we can just take the boat to the mainland, to the docks, and fill up our water. So we're fortunate enough to have that. Many of the other islands don't see the mainland until after the season is completely over. And due to COVID, logistics were a little different the past 2 years because usually Stratton goes to the mainland and does their own food shopping. But due to COVID, we organized a pickup from the docks. So not much mainland time this season. So a lot of time was spent on the island. And that left tent there that you see, the white canvas tent, is our research tent. So that's where we have all our field equipment and all our scopes and data sheets and laptop. That all stays protected on the weatherproof tent. So I'm sure you're wondering where we go to the bathroom and how we shower. So I'll briefly touch on that. So bathroom, we have a nice little outhouse that was built. It's pretty much just a toilet seat in a hole, and you throw some peat moss after you're done. Gets rid of the smell. And yeah, so that's the bathroom situation. And then as far as showering, so there's no running water. There's not really an opportunity to shower. How I tried to stay clean was I would just jump in the ocean and kind of rinse off in there, or just a quick little freshwater rinse whenever there was a hot day. There was an option for a solar shower, but we actually never used it. Maybe solar showers would have been a good idea, but the crew pulled through. I think we were okay. We did go in for showers twice in the whole season. The Prouts Neck dock area allowed us to use their showers. So that was nice of them. Okay, so now we'll talk about a little more serious topic is the status, the current status of our seabirds in the Gulf of Maine. This year was particularly a bad year. Just anecdotally from everyone that has returned to Project Puffin and hearing what they all had to say, they said it was a very wet year. and they said it was just not a good year for terns. There wasn't many feeds. The birds were coming in with, not the typical food sources like herring, sand lance, and hake. They were finding other less desirable fish. So just not a good year. And when you look at it from a bigger perspective, so we're seeing a shift from mostly good years with a few sprinkled bad years to mostly bad years with just a few good years. So these are long-lived birds. They can handle a few bad years, but once you start having more bad years than good, you're going to see that big decline. So let's think about why. Why are we having more bad years than good? On a huge scale, we all know climate change is a huge issue. So how does climate change affect the Gulf of Maine? So the Gulf of Maine is heating up at an alarming rate, and what's causing the foraging fish to move farther out into cooler waters. So the islands aren't too far off shore. There are some northern islands that are pretty far offshore, but regardless, these foraging fish that used to be within the proximity of these islands are all moving further out, and that's causing stress on the adults on how they are going to access their food source. So it's either they find those way far off fish, desirable fish out at sea, which they managed because there was definitely the good fish coming in, or they settle or they resort to less desirable prey items. And that is a huge issue because you can see on that top right photo is a butterfish being fed to a tern chick. So the best type of foraging fish for these terns, they swallow their fish whole. So they want these skinny, long fish to just swallow whole, get them down, and be full. What's the problem with this butterfish is that it's just too wide-bodied. So the tern is going to put the tern chick is going to put a lot of effort into trying to swallow that wide-bodied fish, and eventually it's just going to give up because it just won't fit down its throat. So these chicks are putting a lot of effort into trying to swallow these butterfish that keep coming in. The adults keep bringing in these butterfish, and they're not rewarded with any food. So they start decreasing in health like pretty fast. If you're not eating and they keep trying to, eat these butterfish, it's not a good fate for them. So that factor mixed in with, like I said, a really wet season this year. So storms are becoming more frequent and more intense in the Gulf of Maine. So that means these chicks are succumbing to exposure. So what exactly that means is this year we had Hurricane Elsa move through at a pretty bad time of year. So we had peak hatch. The chicks were doing okay. There was a few storms here and there. And then they got to an age where they're not that big, and they're not that small. So they're in that middle ground. Hurricane Elsa came through, and when storms come through, the best thing for the adults to do is to just stay put and incubate their chicks. If the chick's big enough, it can be right there with its adult and pull through the storm. So what happened here during the timing was just very bad. We had a lot of those intermediate chicks that couldn't fit under their parents to be, incubated, and they couldn't last the whole storm out being exposed to the storm away from their parent. So a lot of those, succumbed to exposure, and we had a huge die-off. And so right there, you can see on the left side picture, just in a few hours, we had up to like 3 or 4 inches of rain. So it was just a really wet year. So with all this in mind, like, I guess let's think about, right? So what can we do? So on a project scale, we're going to continue researching and monitoring these islands, and that in place is going to create good evidence and good data for stronger regulation and management of herring fisheries. So if we can just continue what we're doing project-wise, we can fight for stronger regulation and management of the herring fisheries. On an individual scale, you can support seabird conservation, help awareness, and you can do that by visiting projectpuffin.audubon.org. There's plenty of ways to get involved. You can also just donate, or you can go through this program called Adopt a Puffin. It's pretty cool. You donate money to receive a certificate and a quick biography of your puffin. You also get the book of How We Brought Puffins Back to Egg Rock by Dr. Stephen Kress, the founder of Project Puffin. And then, like I said, since climate change is on a bigger picture here, on an individual level, we can always work on reducing our carbon footprint. Also, always help spread the word. These seabirds need us. You join us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, all that. So thank you so much for listening. Now I guess it's your turn. Had to throw in a pun, at least one pun. So it's your turn. Does anyone have any questions?
Hello, Brian. Great presentation. Very interesting. And
thank you.
I have a lot of questions actually, and I thought I'll wait to the end to ask. And one of the first ones that came to mind was the island is like 2 miles from shore, so it's not very remote. Is it open to the public?
So due to COVID, we actually closed the island from April to August. We have those months where we don't allow anyone to come ashore, but typically we do allow visitors. There's a little visitor trail where you can go to a big open blind where you can check out the colony. Well, we had a few kayakers come by because we have a lot of seals on the island. So we did have a few people try to stop by. But yeah, so in order to reduce disturbance, we closed the island to the public from April to August.
Good. That's a great idea. Another question. In one of the pictures you showed a little bit and you talked about using chicken wire to fence off the research area. And is that to deter from predators? And if so, what are the typical predators that may be seen?
Okay, yeah, so the chicken wire was actually just to section off an area for us to be able to wrangle up the chicks once they become mobile, because we want to follow these chicks until they fledge. Let me just go to that slide. So right here. So yeah, so that chicken wire fence, it's kind of just like a small little fence that the tern chicks can't hop over. As far as predators, the main predators would be great blackback gulls and herring gulls. They can stop by and steal eggs and chicks, but the main huge predator that we can't really do much about is peregrine falcons. So we had a pair of peregrine falcons and it's young. So we had an immature and two adults stopping by maybe 2 to 3 times a day. We try our best to, when we see the whole, it's kind of like a big spectacle. You see a falcon flying and then just thousands of terns following it. So they're pretty good at chasing off the peregrine, but peregrines are just so fast that they just come in, they wham an adult or a chick and then take it and defeather it somewhere and eat it. That's natural. Like, so Dr. Stephen Kress actually talked about this a lot. He mentioned how, so we're trying to restore these birds back into the ecosystem. They're not at the top of the food chain. So these peregrines taking advantage of a tern colony, that's perfectly natural, and that's not something we should interfere with. If it becomes a huge problem, then that's something we talk about. But for the most part, we're restoring these birds back into the ecosystem, and a peregrine coming every day or every few days, successful or not, is just natural to them. They know how to handle it. So the weak probably, succumb to predation, but for the most part, the colony does just fine with peregrine falcons.
Great. All right, I have another question from Lauren, and she asked, how did you protect yourself from diving terns? Also, what was the biggest challenge you faced while on the island? And then, what was your favorite part? And I could read the question again if necessary.
Yeah. So the first one, the diving. Oh, okay. So yeah, this is definitely something I should have talked about. Sorry. But so these terns really dive at you, and you can see how sharp those bills are. I had that hat right there. You can even see there's a giant hole in the top of that hat. They're terrible. They pick a spot and they go after it. So once there was a little hole in my hat, they just knew we have to go after that spot. But I had a supervisor that had been there for a few seasons, and he let me know to put a bunch of cardboard lining in the hat just for an extra bit of protection. So yeah, there was definitely a point where I think they made contact with my skull a few times, and I was like, well, I gotta go put some more cardboard in there.
Yeah.
And another thing we learned is you never point like this, because the high point of your finger, that's what they're gonna go after. So you point like this when you're in the colony. You gotta like be like left, right. Like you learn to really stay in your bubble when you're in the colony. And then second question, what was that again?
What was the biggest challenge you faced while on the island?
The biggest challenge faced on the island. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, not showering for extended periods of time. You really have to like develop this layer of dirt that you're comfortable with and just accept it. So yeah, just going to bed dirty every night was a little tough, but I found my ways around it, taking a quick dive in the ocean or whatever. But the work was amazing. Just, being on a remote island, that was the first time I've done something like that. So definitely challenging, but I feel like I overcome it eventually. That was nice.
Awesome. And then the third part of the question, what was your favorite part?
My favorite part? I think my favorite part was, I think just seeing a tern that I remember banding. It was a roseate tern. I remember banding it and putting a field readable on it and seeing it at the end of the season, fledged and on like the rocks with its parent ready to start migrating. That just felt really rewarding. Just like knowing that, there was those, because it was a tough year. So a lot of the terns, that you give little nicknames to, which is always a bad idea, by the way. Don't give these chicks nicknames because you'll just end up sad. Yeah, a lot of these chicks just, you see them die, and yeah, it's not fun. So definitely seeing a few of the terns that I banded, reciting them along the rocky shores, was really rewarding and probably my favorite part.
Awesome. Okay, I have another question. In one of the slides, you showed the little roseate tern chick, and it had two bands. So you described a little bit of the yellow band. Yes, but for viewers that may not know, what is the silver band for?
Yeah, sorry, I should have touched on that as well.
That's okay.
That's a metal band provided to us by the Bird Banding Lab, so a BBL band. They oversee all bird banding. So every bird that is banded in North America is federally, like, it's pretty much a secure social security number. It has a federal band where the sequence is there engraved onto it. And if you're doing any kind of monitoring project, then we can talk about, adding other like plastic bands, but every bird that is banded should get a federal BBL band. And that's mostly for if, you find a dead bird, or even if you're lucky enough to recite. They are really difficult to recite just because it's small little engraved numbers. But yeah, so if you find a dead bird and it's banded, you can report that.
Great. And you could leave this picture up because I have another question. You mentioned their little tooth on their beak. And how long do those generally stay? And do they just fall off after amount of time?
Yeah, so I can kind of say anecdotally, I saw it kind of like disappear, I guess. It's just a little calcium buildup. I saw it disappear within maybe like a few days or maybe a week. I guess just, they're being fed and just wear and tear, that little calcium deposit eventually just chips off.
Great. All right, on to the next question. You mentioned A chicks and B chicks, and you would mark them differently. Was the designation made due to the hatching order?
Yeah, should have covered that as well. So yeah, so an A chick, that's the chick that hatches first. So the A chick is most likely the chick that's going to do the best because it hatches first. So it's going to bully its siblings maybe a little bit to try to get the food, because the adult just comes in and tries to feed a chick. Whichever one goes for the fish, then that's the one that gets it. So I have seen the adults kind of pick. So they'll come in with like maybe an invertebrate and they'll feed the A chick real quick, come back a few minutes later, feed the B chick, and then come back and feed the C chick. So I have seen that. But for the most part, the A chick is the one that the parents are really gonna invest in. The B chick, which would be the second hatched chick, that's kind of like an insurance policy. Let's say the A chick just isn't doing well or whatever. The B chick is there to take its place. On a good year where adults are coming in with food back and forth, and an A and a B chick can fledge, definitely. This year, we did not have many B chicks fledge. If a B chick fledged, it was because the A chick died. And C chicks, it's pretty much death sentence for the C chick. It's just too much for 2 adult terns to handle. And sometimes even the second adult can abandon and it's left with just 1 adult feeding the chicks. So that A chick is the most energy is put into that A chick.
All right, great explanation. I have another question. You might have mentioned this, but I can't recall if you said it. How long exactly is the season? When did you arrive on the island and when did you leave?
Yeah. So I got there May 12th, I think. Yeah, May 12th. I arrived on Stratton Island and I stayed until August. No, not August. Was it August? Yes, August 10th. Yeah, I stayed until August 10th. Because I was fortunate enough to go to another island after, so the times are a little messed up in my head. But yeah, it's so the season that lines up with the season. So you want to get there early enough to see the birds arriving, and not really spending the night. And then when you notice the terns spending the night, that's when you really want to get things settled. You want to get any veg out of the way. You want to make sure the rosy area has its caves set up, and then in the late part of the season is when you want to recite any kind of migrating birds coming through and the last bit of terns and the last chicks that are fledging. So it's that from May to August, to early August.
Okay, awesome. And here's another one. So it is an island. Have you noticed a lot of trash washing up on the shore?
Yeah, that's a big thing to talk about. So as far as microplastics and things like that here in Florida we just see littered across all of our shores, that was actually not the biggest issue. The biggest issue was the lobster traps. So Maine, Maine lobsters, the amount of lobster traps that just wash up after a storm or even just eventually degrade and break apart and wash up on our shore it's huge numbers of lobster traps. The project actually got a lot of money from I think NOAA, to collect marine debris and note everything that we're collecting. So a lot of the target marine debris are things that are thrown out by lobstermen. So a lot of little small liquor bottles, a lot of those wash up. Just a lot of the pieces of trap, there's like a few different components to the traps. So we note all those things. And yeah, so we late in the season, we did a roundup of marine debris and collected, I don't even know how many traps. There's just a huge pile on the island waiting to be picked up.
Wow.
But microplastics, not a huge problem, which was very surprising to me. I'm used to Florida, there's just so many microplastics.
Wow. And is there any efforts to educate the lobstermen about the trash that they're accumulating?
Yeah, they try. I mean, the problem is these traps, they're set and they're just can be faulty traps, or just a huge storm comes by and washes them. So there's just not really much that, like, you either tell them to stop catching lobster, or it's kind of hard to know what the appropriate solution is. As far as littering, I mean, you can always educate someone on littering, but I don't know, lobstermen are going to be lobstermen. I don't know.
True. Okay, another question. In one of the last slides, you talked about the stronger regulation and management of the herring fisheries. Do you have advice or any input about that, of ways that these fisheries can be better managed?
That's kind of like a real higher up question. That's someone that maybe is very involved and knows how well the herring fisheries are doing. That'd be kind of a difficult question for me to answer, just because I only spent, a summer there. So a lot of the information that I was absorbing was anecdotal stuff that people tell me, like, oh, really wet year, like I said, or this and that. So I don't know. It's definitely, during our annual report, that's what we were all talking about. We're like, what are the solutions here? It's hard to say, like, what's the solution to climate change, right? So yeah, it's a huge problem that takes a lot of components. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I don't really have an answer. Sorry.
No worries. And talking about the climate change again, I'm glad you mentioned about the storms, the increase with the storms are stronger. Hurricane Elsa was there. How did you guys deal with being on the island during the hurricane?
Yeah, so we just hid in our tents or hid in the research tent and weathered through it. It really wasn't, it wasn't like hurricane winds or anything. We had like one tree fall over, but it wasn't anything too serious. On rainy days, we don't work within the colony. We leave the colony alone when it's raining. They need to incubate their chicks and they need to kind of just relax and weather through it. So we don't work within the colony when it's raining. That's when we take advantage of the weather and we do data entry, or we just catch up on other things within the research tent.
Okay, great. And talking about climate change again, had anyone mentioned anything about the you said some of them, like the Arctic tern, they're at their southern breeding range. So because of climate change and temperature fluctuations, are the ranges shifting with some of the species?
Not that I've seen. It's kind of a weird situation with these birds because they were restored to this area. So like I said, that nice nest site fidelity, they have high nest site fidelity, so they're going to want to really come back to where they were born. at least the general area, maybe a northern island or a southern island. But yeah, it's kind of a weird situation where these birds were, hunted, and all the terns left because the big problem is gulls. Gulls deter the terns. Gulls are a lot more widespread now because of landfills, and they kind of just overrun all the seabirds. So yeah, there's a lot of stress being put on these birds. I haven't heard of anything of any of their ranges being extended or limited, but yeah, climate change just adds another huge stress to these birds, which is not great.
Absolutely. And do you have any advice for any aspiring field biologists?
Yeah, apply to Project Puffin. You don't have to be too experienced to be a part of the crew. As long as you're willing to, live on an island for a few months and absorb as much information as you can from people that are experienced and have, are seasoned technicians there. Yeah, just go for it. You can always, volunteer. Well, if you're in school, always volunteer and look for any local stuff. But in the summer, breeding time for the birds is summer. Look for those getaway field jobs where you can, experience a whole new ecosystem, whole new environment where you can learn a lot that is just surface level stuff, but it's just all so new to you that you take in so much. So branch out, stay local at first, branch out when you can. Summer, I'd say, take a break from school. And then, yeah, just work with networking and people you meet along the way.
Awesome. And what are your plans now? Any projects that you're currently involved in?
So right now I'm in the Florida Keys in Marathon. I'm the third counter for the Florida Keys Hawk Watch. It's the Peregrine Falcon migration capital of the world. So we've been counting a lot of peregrine falcons moving through. We're over at Curry Hammock State Park. If anyone wants to come visit, please do. We're there from 9 to 4 every single day. Whether it's raining, whether there's hurricane, we'll be there. But yeah, so that's what I'm currently doing. I'm in the works of applying to grad school as well. That's always a stepping stone after field work is, homing in on what you want to go to grad school for. And yeah, I don't know, the future is unpredictable.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Awesome presentation, even funny parts, specifically talking about the musk from some of the adults and the dive bombing. You really painted a good picture of what life is like if you're on a seabird nesting island. And I did put your contact information in the description in case anyone wants to reach out to you if they have any questions. And thank you again. Great presentation. And I wish you the best of luck for your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. It was fun.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. Stay tuned for our program next month. We will also be resuming it on YouTube Live. Have a good evening.
Bye.